I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on our nonprofit stations and internet all over the world, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and Rebecca together and I are going to bring you an hour of unforgettable radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your dogs and your cats and your parakeets and your iguanas and pretty much everybody and everything, because we're all tied up together in this tiny little dot in the universe called the planet Earth. And,
Speaking of which, can you hear the neighbor's dog barking?
No.
Okay, good, because I can hear it. All right, never mind then.
Yeah.
Full steam ahead. We're all interconnected. Me, the neighbor's dog, yeah, everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have a jam-packed show for you today. Wow. I happen to be in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, having all kinds of adventures, which I tend to do. Got down here on Amtrak, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And so for the next, 10 minutes or so, we're going to be just sort of talking about my observations, eco-observations. Then at 10:15 or so, we're going to be interviewing a woman by the name of Joanne Doroshow, who was one of the associate producers of a movie that we have been following here on For a Green Future since its beginning, before it got finished.
3 Mile Island.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, I know that movie.
Radioactive, The Women of 3 Mile Island. I watched I watched the Washington, D.C. premiere last night, and it was just incredible. Again, it's the second time I've seen it, and it was just wonderful. So we're going to talk to her, and then after we're done talking with her, we will hear from our patrons and advertisers, and our wonderful, wonderful patrons and advertisers. And then we'll hear from Rebecca. Rebecca, what will you be talking about this week?
I'll be talking about queer activist Pinar Sinopoulos-Lloyd for Trans Visibility Day.
Wow, okay. Very interesting. Okay, so...
it is very interesting, actually.
Yes, then after we hear from Rebecca, we're going to hear a whole bunch of ecological news. And man, oh man, things are really hopping on the ecological news front. It's just kind of overwhelming, but we got... Somehow I've managed to winnow out what I think are like the 5 most important stories for this week. And so we'll hear from that, and hopefully at some point in the show we'll hear from you. You can call at 877-909-1007, or you may text at 419-973-5841. This is a call-in show, and people have been telling me I should switch over to a podcast format and just record the show every week and then just send the recording to the station. But part of the reason I got into this is because I love talk radio. I love live interactions with the listeners. I love it when you guys call or text in with your comments. And really, that's kind of why I want to keep this format. So take advantage of it. They can call 877-909-1007 or text 419-973-5841. Okay, diving right into it. I took the Amtrak down here to D.C. because, as you know, regular listeners know, I'm trying never to fly again because of the whole carbon thing. And I took the Lakeshore Limited down here that went along the southern edge of Lake Erie. And just a couple of things. One thing I learned, normally at this time in Lake Erie on the shore, at the end of winter, beginning of spring, you see piles of ice that have been like washed up and after the breaking up and the wind blows it onto the shore. It's piles of ice or they're melting. Lake Erie never froze this year. The highest percentage I could find of ice covering the lake this year was 8%, which really means it never froze. And so we don't know what the effects of that is because, Lake Erie usually freezes. And it was just last year that we had an interview with a biologist. They literally just discovered that under the Lake Erie ice is a whole separate ecosystem based on different algae and different critters than during the times of the year when there is no ice. And so that whole setup, which has been going on for 10,000 years, didn't happen this year. And we don't know really what that's going to do to the summer months. We don't know if it's going to affect walleye production. We don't know anything because we're all those folks that are still global warming doubters, you really try and explain this one because they say, oh, it's there's always variations. Well, there's not always years where the entire Lake Erie doesn't freeze over. That's a new thing. Something else I noticed on the way in, the Phragmites, of course, I've talked about this before, really kind of displacing cattails in a serious way now. It's something that the Lakeshore Limited really does go right along the lake for a lot of the trip, and which is beautiful. And so the train goes right through the middle of wetlands and marshlands and stuff. And over again, I see just endless fields of this invasive species, Phragmites, coming over from Europe and displacing the cattail marshes, which are so productive and so essential to so many animals up here in northwest Ohio and, in the United States. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll be able to turn that around somehow at some point. But at this point, the Phragmites is definitely winning. So I wanted to kind of balance that bad news out with something really kind of inspirational that I saw. And one way that the train goes, it goes through past Syracuse, New York. And there's one of the Finger Lakes in Syracuse. It's called Onondaga Lake. And Onondaga Lake was dead. I mean, everybody knows Lake Erie was called biologically dead back in the 70s before they started pollution control stuff. Well, Onondaga was like really dead. It was killed. It's kind of funny because at the turn of the 20th century, back in the early 1900s, it was a beautiful vacation destination for people all up and down the East Coast because it was such a great lake. But then they put some industry down in the southern tip of it, and that industry killed it with, there was raw sewage from Syracuse, there was mercury, there was chromium, there was all kinds of nasty stuff, and the whole lake, it's a huge lake, and it was described as a cesspool, and it was really dead. Swimming got banned in 1940, if you can believe that, before we even knew about half the stuff we know about. Even in 1940, they were like, people are dying because they're trying to swim in this lake. So, and then fishing got banned in 1970. In 1994, it got declared a Superfund site, and they dredged out the contaminated lake bottom. They've been working on cleaning up their sewage. They have sewage treatment now. Wonderful. And the lake has come back. There's now 65 different species of fish there. And I said, like I said, I wanted to say something inspiring about my trip. As we were going past Onondaga Lake, there were trees between the train and the lake. And in those trees, I saw roosting uh, three or four bald eagles, fully mature, beautiful, majestic looking bald eagles that kind of turned their heads and watched the train go by. And it was just a reminder, and one thing that I really stress over and over again in For a Green Future is that we can fix it when we make the decision. Like in 1994, when they turned the lake into a Superfund site and started the cleanup and started the restoration, things got better. The lake has come back, and now you can fish there. And, it's surrounded by parkland now. And it's just a beautiful example that, we can do this, folks. We can fix things. But they won't just fix themselves. Once you break something, it doesn't just fix itself. You have to really try. And that's one of the reasons that I find the movie Radioactive, The Women of 3 Mile Island, so inspiring, because the women that are showcased in this movie have been trying literally for decades to get the full story of what happened at 3 Mile Island out, to get the government to acknowledge the health damage that's happened to them and their families. And it was just great. And so I'm very happy to have our special guest on this episode. Joanne, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
All right, great. So could you just tell us your full name and what your association with the movie was?
Sure. My name is Joanne Doroshow. I am featured in this documentary because when I was a very young lawyer, 40 some years ago, I intervened on behalf of the local community group to try to stop the restart of 3 Mile Island. This was the undamaged sister reactor to the facility that had the meltdown in 1979. So I'm in the film, but I also helped as an associate producer of the documentary.
Right, and quite the documentary it is. You folks last night got another standing ovation. Well deserved. You mentioned that you've worked on other films before. What sort of films have you worked on?
I'm mostly a public interest lawyer. That's sort of my career, which started with the 3 Mile Island case. But in between, I have worked on other. I've got involved in documentary films. I worked. My first film was called The Panama Deception, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary in 1993. So I kind of peaked pretty early in the documentary film world, but I worked on some films with Michael Moore, Fahrenheit 9/11, and Sicko on the healthcare industry. And then I also helped produce some television with Michael. So that's kind of the different kinds of projects I've worked on.
Right, and well, that's great. And the audience response in the two showings that you've had so far on this film has been sort of overwhelming. And the reviews are great. A lot of people that have seen the film have got some really great reviews on your website. Did you know, or did you suspect basically how successful this was? Because it was really a moving kind of movie. Did you, as it was being produced, did you get a sense that this was really going to be a great movie?
Well, the film, we know, focuses on some pretty moving stories. It's not. I'm in it, but in addition, there are 4 women from the Middletown area. That's where TMI is. Who had formed a little organization back then called the Concerned mothers of Middletown, and we call them the Middletown moms. And they're just their stories are so compelling, and they're also very funny and very entertaining to watch. So knowing that they were going to be a large part of the film, I think Heidi Huttner, who was the director of the film, knew to zero in on, by zeroing in on those stories, it would end up being a pretty good film. And I think Heidi did a great job as director of the film, pulling all of this together.
Yes, I would I would agree. So this is you're the second showing of the film, second public showing, but you guys have showings coming up, right? You've got I think it's 7 more film festivals that you're going to be at so far. If people wanted to know how to get there, or how to possibly see this movie, where could they go? How do they do this?
Yeah, there are some screenings coming up. We're actually doing a couple screenings in Harrisburg tonight to commemorate the 44th anniversary of the accident, which is coming up on March 28th. And following that, the film's going to be at the Sarasota Film Festival in Florida. There are going to be there's a screening in Long Island, as well as Nyack, New York, coming up. If you happen to be in Rio, the film's going to be playing at a film festival in Brazil. But in addition, and there are a few other festivals that have not confirmed dates yet. Heidi is in the process of submitting the film right now to film festivals. And that's sort of the process that happens with the documentary. You get into film festivals, and then following that, there hopefully will be an opportunity, whether streaming or a larger release, that more people will be able to see the film. So the best way to keep up on all of that is just check out the film's website, and all the screening information will continue to be posted there.
And the website is?
I think radioactivethefilm.com. Actually, I don't have it top my. If people just search for the film Radioactive, The Women of 3 Mile Island, all of that information will come up.
Right. Well, you are correct. It's radioactivethefilm.com. So, okay. So Heidi talked a little bit, and you guys talked a little bit in the Q&A after the movie, which was also great. And I want to acknowledge the New Republic magazine that co-sponsored the showing today. I was very happy to see a big media outlet like that taking notice. But I kind of got the impression that she was sort of surprised. The whole sort of falling into making this movie, it wasn't something she sort of planned and went after. It's sort of something that just kind of appeared in her life. And I was wondering, what about the movie surprised you? And I also have to say that, I was in the audience last night, and I heard other people talking, some people who've been anti-nuclear activists for years, and almost everyone learned something they didn't know about the disaster from this movie. What surprised you the most as the movie was being created?
Well, of course, as the lawyer who was very involved in this, the post-accident period, I knew far more, I felt, than the public really understood about the accident. The nuclear industry grabbed hold of the narrative about it, and their narrative was, this accident was no big deal, nobody died, let's move on. But those of us very involved at the time knew that this was an extraordinarily serious accident that was a near catastrophe, and there was a lot of radiation that got out of that plant, and that now, years later, because cancers tend to take many years to manifest, you're seeing really an extraordinary numbers of illnesses and seemingly sicknesses related to that accident. And that, I think, is surprising. Maybe not surprising, but it is a revealing situation that sadly is anecdotal at this point, because health studies were never properly begun at the start of this accident. That's because the nuclear industry insisted that, very little radiation got out. People, though, at the time saw the effects of it right away, and it was extremely frustrating for the community to not have their concerns taken seriously, and the health studies, as a result, were never properly done. What's shown in the film is that now there are some new attempts, to take a look at chromosomal damage within the bodies of people that were close to the accident, the plant at the time, and maybe there'll be some confirmation that their health was affected by this accident. But it's a real tragedy that their concerns were ignored initially, and that as a result, we're never really going to know for sure what the full health impact was of that community.
Yeah, the pro-nuclear trolls that I battle regularly on Twitter are still repeating the lies, the quote-unquote official story from 3 Mile Island, that there was barely any radiation released. But I think it's kind of fair to say that, half the core melted. There's no way a lot of radiation could not have been released.
Yes, there clearly were the radiation monitors weren't even working at that day when most of the radiation got out the first day, at a time when the company was in the process of trying to cover the whole thing up. The plant was wildly out of control for most of the first day of the accident. The core was melting. It was 30 minutes, we now know, about 30 minutes from a full-fledged meltdown through the bottom of the containment, which would have been a huge, catastrophe, spewing radiation for miles. It was the community was really in peril, and nobody told anybody. The company was keeping all of that from the state officials, even from the nuclear regulatory commissioners themselves. So while this horrible danger was happening to this community, the company was in the process of trying to cover it up. Eventually, the information came out, but it was sadly too late to protect people's health from that accident.
Right, and we officially stopped looking for damage to people's health, even though everyone was promised studies at the time. There haven't been those studies, so the damage, when they say, "Oh, there was no health effects," well, that's because they didn't look.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't look, and because of the failure to keep proper monitors as to what was really coming out of there, they fall back on this position. Well, we didn't see anything that was really too serious. But of course, they never looked. They never looked properly. I mean, radiation coming out of a plant goes into the air, and there's a plume, and it goes over communities. Nobody was looking at that at all at the time.
Yeah, it's
so
amazing
now
what
we're seeing the impact.
Yeah, it's amazing what you don't see when you have your eyes closed. So
yes, and they absolutely, yeah.
So your part in the film, you carried the battle to keep the other. There were two plants at 3 Mile Island. The one that melted down, and then there was another one that the local residents, and we're talking state and local, tried to not reopen, and you carried that battle all the way to the through the NRC process. You held up the restart for 6.5 years, which was great. But could you just sort of recap what the end result of that battle was?
Yeah, so the NRC had established a hearing process, supposedly to reassure the community that if they had hearings and the hearings came out in favor of the health and the safety of the plant and the ability of the operator of the plant to operate safely, they would reopen the sister reactor TMI-1. So they set up the hearing process. But during the course of the hearings, so much information about misconduct and wrongdoing and criminal behavior by the company came out through the hearing process that I was involved in, as I said, as a very young lawyer, as well as my co-counsel in this case was a waitress by the name of Louise Bradford, who worked at night so she could go to the hearings during the day. I mean, it was crazy that we were doing this. We were doing the case, and yet we were able to keep the process going long enough that all the truth came out about this company and its egregious lack of integrity, and that it clearly should not be given a license to operate our nuclear reactor again, particularly in that traumatized community. So Louise and I worked really hard and kept the hearing process going and going and going. But we knew that this was a rigged process. We were never going to win before the NRC. Our hope was to develop enough political opposition over the course of the years that we kept in it, that would work somehow. And it did, to the extent that we were able to get all the politicians in the entire state pretty much on our side on this, that the plant should not reopen, including the governor, both U.S. senators, all of Congress in that area, all Republicans, by the way. This is a conservative area. And yet it was still not enough. And the NRC was intent on opening that plant, no matter what was discovered in the hearing process, apparently. So they eventually, in 1985, that's 6 years or so after the accident, finally voted against us and voted to restart the plant. I mean, it was outrage in the community. There was constant protests going on all this time to stop the restart. And you can imagine how the community exploded in anger after that NRC vote. But we ended up going to court to try to stop this decision by the NRC. We were not successful initially in the Court of Appeals. We went to federal court. We got a 2-1 decision against us, and then using that dissent as kind of the basis of a Supreme Court appeal, I ended up filing at least the initial motion with the Supreme Court to stop the plant from operating. And we got that. I got what's called a stay of the Third Circuit decision. But unfortunately, it's like 2 weeks later, the Supreme Court came back in, reversed that, and ordered the plant to reopen the next day. And that's what happened. So in October 1985, TMI-1 restarted. And it was a terrible injustice to that community that was still very traumatized by the accident and very concerned about their health and safety.
Right. But I do believe that one of the results of your struggle, even though TMI Reactor 1 did restart, I do believe that that's part of what sort of held the nuclear industry at bay for many, many years, because as more and more of the truth comes out, people realize, how terrible an energy choice nuclear is. Well, we're just about out of time here. I hope you get standing ovations at all your showings. It's definitely well deserved. Anything you'd like to add
Thank
before
you.
we wrap up?
I just hope that people who are some of this came up in our Q&A. Nuclear gets discussed a lot as a clean alternative to fossil fuels and as an answer to climate. It isn't. This is a very dangerous technology that has enormous health and safety implications for people. And companies tend to want to cover up when things go wrong. And we have a federal government through the NRC that is in lockstep with the industry and assists in these cover-ups. So I hope everybody gets to see this film, and you'll see, more clearly how that happens and how this is a very bad alternative to anything.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Joanne. It's been great.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. All right. That was Joanne Doroshow, and it's time for us to move on to our advertisers and patrons. Hooray! For Green Futures brought to you by the Ecofill Shop. Ecofill Shop is located at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green, Ohio. They have lots of different products, cosmetics, bath and body, home and garden, cleaning, towels, knickknacks, candles, fragrances, and more. They sell all these things without plastic containers. The whole purpose of the Ecofill Shop is to eliminate plastic. Customers love them. Summer says, I'm loving the products they offer. It's sensible and affordable, all while being eco-friendly and plant-based, eliminating the unnecessary use of chemicals. And that's just one of the many glowing testimonials that you'll hear or see at their website, ecofillshop.com. I am a customer of the Ecofill Shop. I just, in fact, brought my reusable container and filled it up with shampoo, which I'm using, and my hair is still nice and thick and lustrous for a 60-year-old guy, that is. And so
It's pretty good. I've seen it. He's got good hair.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if you're interested, you can call them at 419-944-8862 and talk to the owner, Josie, who's very passionate about all environmental issues. Or you can go to their website, ecofillshop.com. That's ECOFILLSHOP.com. Or better yet, just drop by the store at 115 West Mary in Bowling Green. That's the Ecofill Shop. And For Green Futures also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, they provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, wcparks.org, or you can check them out on any of the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. You just search for WC Parks. And we're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. That's the Wood County Park District. Okay, Rebecca, that brings us to you. So let's hear about this activist person that you have researched.
Okie dokie. Well, a couple days, I believe, coming up. We got either National or International Day of Trans Visibility. Yeah, that's it. So for that, I thought I would look for a transgendered activist, and I found a couple of mentions, several actually, of this person, Pinar Sinopoulos-Lloyd. I found this article in OregonWild.org saying that they are the founder of something called Queer Nature, based out of Colorado, where they educate and teach ancestral skills to the queer community and allies. And a big part of this is recognizing colonial legacies and indigenous histories that encompass the land. So, I mean, they're not just coming from, oh, you shouldn't pollute the land. They're kind of looking at the role of colonialism and the way that European civilization, kind of tends to see the land as something to be subdued and conquered, and indigenous peoples on the land. So, I mean, I think that's kind of good. I think the environmentalist problems come from a larger attitudinal problem on our part, and that needs to be recognized. Um, yeah, Pinar is also a founding member of the Intersectional Environmentalism. What is that? That's a council, I think. They're a council member, which is dedicated to which stated mission is the protection of the earth and all living inhabitants. Because that's kind of the deal with intersectionalism. Is if you've never heard of it, it's sort of when you're working on one issue, be aware of other issues playing into it. Like you're working on environmentalism, be aware of the way that racism plays into that, for example. And culture plays into that, and gender plays into that, a lot of different things. So they're also the trans ambassador of Native Women's Wilderness, and the 2020 recipient of the National Audubon Society's National Environmental Champion Award. That's not me making a mistake. There are that many nationals in the title of that award. So I went to their actual website, purenature.org, which I believe, Pinar may have written a lot of this bio themselves. Anyway, they're described there as an award-winning indigenous multi-species futurist, and of Quechua, Turkish, and Chinese descent. Quechua being a native people from mostly Peru, also Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, and Argentina. And they describe themselves as also having a lifelong apprenticeship to the ecotone of riparian systems. So yeah, they're a writer. It takes one to know one. This is how we talk, sometimes. Riparian mean rivers. I had to look it up again, although I think I already knew that. So yeah, they have a special interest in rivers, actually. And
given us that vocabulary word before, so yeah.
Yeah, I have, but I'm not real smart, so I need a review sometime. I couldn't remember what it meant. Yeah, so they're one of the things they like to do as part of this group is uplift and amplify the brilliant survival skills that Black and Indigenous people of color and LGBTQ2SIA. I know what most of those, I'm not sure what the S is. Anyway, and other systemically targeted populations already have in their resilient bodies and stories of survival. So yeah, that sounds like a good idea, turn your minuses into a plus. And Pinard's also the recipient of Rise Indigenous 2020 Art and Poetry Fellowship. Cool. And a founding member of the Diversity Outdoors Coalition. So, yeah, this seems like an important angle of the environmentalist movement that they're working on, basically.
Sounds like a very interesting person to maybe go out for a few drinks with.
Definitely. I can kind of see where it all hangs together. Just let the earth be what it is and let people be what they are,
Gotcha. All right.
Instead of hassling them to be something else.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's true. We are trying to reshape the world all the time, and when the world was actually in pretty good shape before we started our whole, let's make this better thing, which, lots of times it does not end up better. So
similarly, trans people need to be allowed to be what they are, I think.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. So now
Welcome.
on to ecological news, and as I said, we got a ton of it. One important one that I wanted to get out is a study just came out. It was a study done by the LUT University in Finland. And LUT is an abbreviation for several Finnish words that I am not even going to attempt to pronounce. I mean, so many vowels. Yeah, but they did a study saying that going 100% renewables would save the UK $211 billion. This was article published in Renew Economy back on January 19th. And right now, Britain has, the UK has a net zero plan, but their net zero plan includes things like nuclear power and carbon capture and sequestration. And so what these researchers did at LUT University is they just said, well, what if we got rid of all the not really completely green stuff like carbon capture, which allows you to burn more fossil fuels, and just went wind and solar and water, the way so many people have been saying, like Mark Jacobson and people like that. And they found that, like I said in the headline, that would save the UK $211 billion. It would also mean putting 20% less carbon into the atmosphere, and it would save. The carbon captured storage is still theoretical. So even though it's part of the UK's plan right now, it's like a part to be filled in later, because they really still don't know how to do it at scale. So just nice to see yet another study reinforcing what we've been saying all along, which is wind, solar, and storage are enough. Let's just get on with it already. Okay, one thing that was stopped from getting on, and this is another story which received a tiny bit of attention from the mainstream media, but not enough that anybody remembers it. President Biden did his first veto this past Thursday. He did the veto the week before, and essentially what's happening is that some more and more investment firms, that the people that have retirement funds and control them, want to invest in what's called ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and good. And the Republicans in Congress oppose things that are environmental,
good,
socially beneficial,
right,
and good. And so they actually passed a law. U.S. Congress passed a law saying, blocking a rule that the Labor Department had said that some retirement funds can start considering ESG in their investment decisions. Instead of, by law, they're mostly required to focus solely on getting the best possible return. So some retirement funds want to give their people who've got their investments a choice and say, would you like to make sure some of your retirement money is invested in things that are environmentally beneficial, socially beneficial, and good? Republicans did not like that, so they forced a law. They got it passed with the help of some Democrats. There's always some of those Democrats. Passed the House 216 to 204, passed the Senate 50 to 46, which meant all the Republicans showed up and 4 of the Democrats showed up, or voted, quote unquote, voted by not showing up. And a couple Democrats did actually vote for it. It passed, and Biden vetoed it. So it was a good veto. And what did happen this past Thursday, March 23rd, is the Republicans were unable to override his veto in the House. It needs a 2/3 vote to override a veto. And because they didn't get that, it's not even going to go to the Senate. It's just dead, which it was a good thing. It was a good thing to kill, because, they're literally voting against the good here.
Yeah, come on. That's not a good.
ESG,
Yeah.
environmental, social, and good. They don't want things that are good. So it's like, okay, you're really kind of showing your hand here. So yeah. So that was a good story. And now, unfortunately, whipsaw effect. This is a story you probably did hear mentioned on mainstream media.
Good is actually an acronym for gruesome, odd, obnoxious, and dangerous.
Well, in the minds of some people.
Right.
But,
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right.
I really like fake acronyms, so sorry. I had to come out with that one.
Okay, well, here's another acronym, the IPCC.
Acronyms.
Right. International Panel on Climate Change. They came out with their 2023 report that they're required to measure the progress in reaching the Paris Agreement goals to stop global warming, to stop putting carbon in the air and so forth. And you probably heard on the news that this is basically, they're saying catastrophe, folks. We are at the catastrophe point. So I read through some of it. It's really huge. I didn't get through all of it, but some of the main points that you might not have heard on the news, they are saying we have already reached 1.1 degree centigrade warming globally. Which is 1.98, which is just shy of 2 degrees Fahrenheit warming on the globe. They also are saying, conclusively, without a doubt, 100%, yes, it's us. It's us humans. It's the stuff we've put into the atmosphere that has changed that number and caused that warming. In fact, there's more CO2 in the atmosphere now than there has been for 2 million years. And there's more methane and nitrous oxide, or two more potent greenhouse gases, more of that in the air than there has been for 800,000 years. And it is already causing, they're saying very clearly, that amount of warming is already causing damage. Crops are failing. A number I didn't realize, half the population of the Earth, half of humans on the planet, last year faced some sort of water shortage, either long or short term, because of global warming, because the heating planet is making water evaporate quicker. Rivers are drying up, lakes are shrinking, and I hadn't realized we were already to the point. That's 4 billion people in 2023 were affected by some kind of water shortage. They are talking a lot about adaptation. In other words, build the dikes to keep the ocean back and stuff. That is kind of a lot of environmentalists feel that we should first be focusing on getting rid of the CO2, then we'll worry about adaptation, because a lot of these adaptations they're talking about would put more carbon in the air. So you're making the problem worse faster than you're dealing with the consequences of it. But one of the two other main points from this, they're saying that the risks are getting riskier. In other words, as the temperature rises, the bad things that happen, like droughts and storms, the droughts are getting drier, the storms are getting stronger. And so the longer we put off this transition, and that's the other final point, is that we have to hit zero. We cannot kind of ease our ways to less and less carbon. They're saying if we don't hit zero carbon, since we're already at 1.98, that's not good enough. And the things will get worse and worse. So,
Okay, sorry, who's this coming from again? Just repeat
the
this.
International Panel on Climate Change. That's the
International
United
Panel on
Nations.
Climate Change.
Yeah, the
Okay.
United Nations body that's tasked with enforcing the Paris Climate Agreement. So, well, I say enforcing. There is no enforcement. They're tasked with keeping track of how we're doing on the Paris agreements. So,
Right.
so yep. So that's that story. Next story, Inside Climate News, March 5th. Title is Kentucky Residents Angered by U.S. Forest Service Plan That Targets Mature Trees. And we've talked before about Joe Biden's evil plan to clear cut like 20 million acres of public lands. Part of that is a plan to clear cut the southern mountains of the Daniel Boone National Forest. And they're targeting 10,000 acres with ancient trees, 200 to 400-year-old trees. And the people in that region are really up in arms about it, because what they've been finding when they've clear cut mountains, this is not something new, folks. We've always known this. That causes mudslides. Once you cut down all the trees, you got this mountain with bare dirt, get a heavy rain. And last year, actually, 44 people were killed in those mountains by mudslides on areas that had been clear cut. So people are
Yeah,
really
I'll tell you
literally-
what.
Go ahead.
Being buried in mud is a nasty way to go too.
Yes, it is. And so a lot of people are literally fighting for their lives here because they live in the valleys below these mountains, which could, if they cut down all these trees, literally they could be wiped out. So he's also looking at clear cutting in the next couple years another 370,000 acres of old growth around the country. So this Daniel Boone one is just one of many plans to get rid of old growth forests. And it's being justified by the old bad science, the science of 20 years ago, where they thought that the young trees, because they grow faster, sequester more carbon than the old trees. And we now know from research it's exactly the opposite, that young forests actually give off carbon dioxide for the first 20 to 30 years, whereas in old growth forests, those huge old trees are sequestering carbon way, way faster than a young tree does, just because they're big, and old, and they put tons of carbon back into the soil and the ground. So not a good plan by the Biden administration, and so hopefully they'll at some point reject it and change their minds. But it's not good. All right, and so last story, I wanted to finish on kind of an upbeat. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I think we have a text here. Yes, we do have a nice long text. Greetings from Youngstown, where we are not just oblivious to climate issues, but also dislike nature in general. I don't know if that speaks for everybody in Youngstown.
Well, this town kind of belongs to the tire and rubber industry, so maybe.
Gotcha. So the text continues. Here, our Green Gem Mill Creek Metro Parks is considering a deer hunt of over 2,000 deer. The director and boards of trustees claim that there's an overpopulation through all the parcels of park properties. However, when you hike through the parks, you rarely see deers. You rarely see tracks. Park employees manicure and trim the vegetation severely, and then they blame it on deer. So they're pretending to be deer, I guess. The director happens to be a landscape architect who seems to be trying to make our parks into a refined green space. In other words, park into lawn. We've talked about that before. And they're going to have a bow and arrow hunt and a gun hunt in their parks. And citizens are afraid of hunters in their backyards, creating a war zone. It's a mess. So, well, that's a interesting. It's good news story for us to report on, because you're probably not going to hear about that anywhere else. But thank you for the text. All right, on to our final story. And like I say, I like to have some good news in there as well as the depressing stuff. The EPA had a contest for a competition, actually, for the best technologies for destroying PFAS. We've talked about PFAS before, the forever chemicals, quote unquote. Well, it turns out there are ways to get rid of them, and we've talked about that before, specifically supercritical water thermal oxidation. So the Environmental Protection Agency had a competition and awarded a $40,000 prize, and a company called Aquaga Incorporated, they have a process, they call it hydrothermal processing, and it looks like it's sort of like supercritical water thermal oxidation plus. They add alkalinity to the water, and that helps, and that will apparently destroy the PFAS without burning it. Right now the main way to quote unquote destroy PFAS is to put it in an incinerator, and most of the time that results in the PFAS just going out the smokestack and into the surrounding countryside. So this is a closed process using water in a loop, basically, and so that was a great that's a great thing to come up with a technology that would destroy it. So we will be needing that technology, but as we said in last week's show, you don't allow the production to continue and then try to deal with it as it's happening. First you stop making more of it. So we need a complete global ban on PFAS because it's a global problem. But congratulations to the people at Aquaga Incorporated. And the runners-up, there were two runners-up. One of them had a process that can destroy PFAS using ultraviolet light mixed with some non-toxic chemical additives. And another has a way of destroying it with plasma, a plasma discharge destruction. So the main point I want to make here is it can be done. All these people that say, oh, you can't get rid of all the PFAS in the environment, and you can't have a grid, a truly green grid that doesn't use any fossil fuels or nuclear. Yeah, we can. And we've been proving it over and over again in different places. And so my main point, one of my main points on For a Green Future has always been don't despair. You know, all we have to do is actually focus our energies on creating a green future. And that's both on the individual level and the personal level. So go out and get some solar panels on your house, go get a electric car, and talk to your neighbors and get involved in all this kind of environmental stuff. And together, we will create a green future. That's about it for this show. Thank you so much. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.